Tashile. Warm greetings, friends. I'm Drakpa. Welcome to my woods. Just reactivate our bodhicitta motivation of love, compassion, and wisdom for all beings, near and far, known and unknown, every single being, friends, family, strangers, enemies, everyone included, by kind of contemplating Buddha Dharma together, practicing it in our experience. May it become the direct healing balm, perfect medicine for every single being to wake up to their 100% glorious, amazing, natural state. So I wanted to just kind of offer some simple reflections on simplicity. It's like kind of information age overload for a lot of us now. Some people are burnt out, some of us are drowning, some of us are overwhelmed, tuning out. It's hard. It's hard to be so connected. It's hard to move so fast. It's hard to know so much. And so there's this natural response of just, wow, I need to simplify some things. And here this topic, especially in terms of syncing up, of this uplifting, of being in touch with our goodness bodhicitta nature, and that goodness bodhicitta nature in all beings, and all places actually, in all worlds, related to this like an actual kind of surrendering or an actual kind of aligning, attuning with others, with the worlds we're in, and to kind of elegantly, gracefully like flow with them. This is this kind of up-leveled or higher order, this kind of more integrative simplicity, this naturalness that comes with like being a part of something and like tuning to it and responding with it and kind of creatively giving it feedback and receiving feedback. It's to actual belong to these larger wholes that we're a part of and to care for the larger wholes that are within us. So this simplicity, we want this simplicity. And the challenge is we want the simplicity in a very complex way. We want simplicity amongst a lot of complexity, within daily life, within 21st century kind of intelligence. We want to be simple. And so that's a big challenge there because we're actually looking for up-leveled or deeper kind of simplicity, a simplicity within complexity. So in Tibetan Buddhism, a good example is a Pith instruction or upadesha. These upadeshas, the technical boring word would be like transcontextual, like meta-heuristics. These in all contexts, within, between all contexts, there are these elegant rules of thumb that actually compress or distill, essentialize like the kind of the root level integrity structures and insights of everything that it's a part of, everything that makes it up, of everything that it's connected to and everything that like actually comes together to make it up. A heuristic is a rule of thumb. Meta-heuristic is these heuristics that can be used between contexts. But the trouble is they need to be non-reductionist. We're not looking for just mere platitudes, kind of cliches. We're looking for deeper layered, more integrity, simplicity beyond complexity. Pith instructions. And it's a brilliant, amazing point that it's said that if we get to know the Buddhist teachings very in a more refined or a more kind of appreciative way, we'll see that everything the Buddha ever taught was a Pith instruction. That there was always the exactly perfect medicine for that given context, for who was in it, what was happening, what happened before to kind of arrive at that context, where the context was available to open into and change. That the Buddha always aligned and attuned perfectly with a given context according to what was available. Say on the side of the student, their receptivity and capability, what the minds of the beings are actually available for the next level, next layer, next line, next more full, integrative move for that being, for that heart and that mind. So any move into a greater integration is an integral move, is a move towards greater integration, regardless of where in the multiplicity of layered perspectives that make up a single elegant moment. Every move to greater fullness and freedom is an integrative or an integral move. Is bodhicitta shining on more brightly. And so just to make the point really distilled, this higher order, or this kind of like simplicity within complexity, is bodhicitta. It is the answer to every question. It is the non-reductionist meta-heuristic that always helps. It's always uplifting. Bodhicitta, the heart mind of enlightenment, mutual uplift, attuned to what actually helps now, what serves now. That's the impulse of the Bodhisattva, those courageous for the enlightenment of all beings. And with that impulse, like it actually has to use wisdom, not just compassion, but wisdom and compassion in natural union. And the wisdom part is knowing the causes and conditions, the factors that are making up a context, outer, inner, self, and other, all these layers that we went through quickly before of these layers and lines, states, types, quadrants, shadows, like all the multiplicity of cause, condition, and effect. Knowing that is the wisdom component. We're like more fully inclusively sensitive to, in an accurate way, cause, condition, and effect, or dependent origination. That's the expanding wisdom component. And then compassion is to like elegantly mutually uplift within the context, given whatever is available, on its terms, on the mutually agreed upon shared terms of the context, with a person, with an animal, between people, with oneself and others. Like what's the action, like what's the actionable, like actually common ground? Where are the connections that we can live within? And so this is part of like simplicity within complexity. Go to a forest. Why is it soothing? Why does it feel good to be in the ground? Because it's just an abundantly complex system that's naturally aligning with itself all the time in these adaptive ways. There's so much living and dying, and there's so much frothiness and messiness and and it's the complexity that's actually like tuned itself over a long periods of time to have these ways of working together, of creating community, of creating ordered kind of complexity or systems that like we get into it and we can relax, and just all of a sudden we swept away a part of this just like abundant kind of cascading multiplicity of complexity. And it's just a forest. And how lovely. It just feels so good. It feels so good to me. I mean, it's so wonderful. And so this is to the point that the great Tyson Yunkaporta, the Appalachian Clan, Australian Aboriginal kind of elder, you could say, he wrote Sand Talk and other books. Like the problem with just seeing things as non-reductionist meta-heuristics, or just seeing them as like these techniques that we can take out of a context and plug and play wherever we want, is that it's placeless. But everything that involves wisdom and compassion is in place, it's in body, it's in space and in time. It is relational. You can't just take a technique out of a context and think that you have the fullness of the technique, like the McMindfulness movement. You can't just take mindfulness out of Buddhism and plug it into anything you want as if that's the full teaching. It's not the full teaching. It's one of the threads of the Eightfold Noble Path. Right mindfulness, right livelihood, right speech, right view. These 8 threads come together in an integrative whole to create this cord or this thread that's liberative, this wholeness. And it's an amazing thing that it produces like a complex system, or what Professor John Vervaeke calls a counteractive dynamical system. What does that mean in the context of liberation? That because we're having to fully show up in time, in place, in body, with others, self, with others, making culture, in infrastructure, that's society, so self, other, world, we have to like care for these 8 living threads in a way that our egoic self-absorption can't easily control all of them. it actually has to surrender to the dynamic intelligence of these multi-threaded, multi-layering, frothing, bursting kind of complexity that's there of such a nuanced path, the Eightfold Noble Path. And just taking one piece of it as a technique that we can like use as a life hack and then plug and play wherever we want, that's not a Pith instruction. That's a simplicity before complexity. That's just, decontextualizing a thing that we enjoy, and there might be tremendous benefit from that thing, but we're taking it out of place and out of time, out of body, out of mind, and like that's part of the elegance of syncing up, of being in place, in time, independence, is that we can use the intelligence of all these systems that we're a part of, that like literally place us, hold us, anchor us, check us, hold us accountable, nourish us, feed us, give us signs of danger. We don't have to design it all. We don't have to engineer this thing. It's not some problem we have to figure out. It's something we actually have to more elegantly be with. And so these higher order or up-leveled kind of simplicity within complexity, I don't like to think of it as simplicity beyond complexity. In Buddhist terms, beyond usually means within. Beyond doesn't mean like going away from, like out of a box of limitations as if we can just disregard that box anymore. It doesn't mean leaving a place like planet Earth and all of a sudden now we can do what we want in some other planet. It doesn't mean purely transcendent, or like in the context of spirituality, it doesn't mean spiritual bypassing. We actually have to honor the threads that make us up, that are a part of us. Like this is the eminent transcendence. This is like the more tantra approach. Well, like what is in time, in place right now, in this world, in my body, its nature is dependent origination, which means free-flowing emptiness, openness. The fullness of the complexity, it's full because it's allowed to free flow without being stuck and fixated in any one spot. So because of time and place, and the fluidity of time and place, the intermingling, the co-shaping of time, place, self, other, world, and inhabitants, because they're always counteractively like making each other up, co-participating, sympathetically, poetically, self-aligning, self-attuning, self meaning this greater self, this greater kind of circles of inclusion, greater wholeness. Because of that, then we get these elegant ways to be with a flow, in the flow, as the river moves, as dependent origination happens. And those elegant tips or advice are called Pith instructions because they don't take us out of the context. They show up in the context and they give us ways that help us tune more comprehensively within that context. So, for example, a Pith instruction, as Guru Rinpoche said very famously, now in this time of degenerate age, like the most helpful meditative way to do meditation for most people is short moments, many times. The great master Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche mentioned this so much too. Short moments, many times. If we have a high quality, embodied, embedded, like very kind of alive, vivid, fresh wakefulness, this insight, to do that for a short period of time, in time and place, is like so much more beneficial than just having a long 3-hour meditation session where we're just like falling asleep the whole time. High quality bursts of integrity, and then we get familiar, that's called a view, and then we get familiar with that longer and it expands into a meditation, like a more stabilized view. And then we start integrating and layering like other activities into it. That's called conduct or behavior. And that creates this simplicity within complexity. So we need this like very HQ, like really high quality presence in body, in place, in time. And then gradually that kind of relaxes and we get more familiar with that and it expands. So the short moments many times. And there are these two general paths that we have as Buddhists, like the path of the yogi and the path of the scholar. So the path of the yogi, yogini, or the path of the scholar. The path of the scholar starts from the outside and gradually looks in. We look at the surface features more, understand how they're working, what are the mechanics, what are the relationships, is this true, we verify, and gradually we come in. And what does that mean? We get closer to the mind. This subjective ways that we're engaging objective reality. The exterior and the interior always together. There's always an inside and an outside. There's always a subjective awareness of a objective world. There's always a knower and a known. So like in the more scholarly approach, we start with the more exterior, quantifiable aspects of reality, and we gradually, by looking carefully at them with rigor, according to whatever metric that rigor is, we start looking at them, and we start getting to see how powerful our mind is as a co-creative influence over that interaction, over our way of knowing, being, becoming. And so that's going outside to in. And the way of the yogi or yogini is to start inside and then let it emerge out. And so they say the path of the yogi yogini is defined by devotion. This trust, this deep, warm, sizzling, close, warm-hearted connection to time and place, to lineage tradition, to the living thread of enlightened wisdom in people, in minds, in hearts, in places, like actually tap into and surrender, be with the living lineage stream, this chain of uninterrupted golden mountains of these lineage masters who've had fully bodhicitta turn on all the time. The path of the yogi or the yogini uses a pith instruction to surrender to these multiplicity of like internested contextual layered worlds, and to go with that flow. So it's more direct, because we don't have to understand all the mechanics of how the worlds work. We can like surrender to them with intelligence, let the intelligence of all these multifolding systems kind of like be feeding us and be what we're contributing with. And all of a sudden we're kind of like start from the result and then allow the result to express itself more naturally, instead of the more sutra approach where we start from the outside, gradually we go in. The tantra approach starts from the result and expands the result as an expression, like life or experience is an expression. So we go into the open awareness and it unfolds as an expression of awareness. Or the more scholar approach is we start outside with what do I experience, what is the known, what's the world, what are the features, and gradually we get closer as we look and investigate more thoroughly, and we see that those features are always interactive with our awareness. So either way, and we can use both. We can use the scholar approach to go from out to in. We can use the yogi yogini or kind of kusulu, like simple meditator approach, and go from inside and out. A scholar approach looks with like very extended study. It's really thoroughly, rigorously analyzed. The yogi yogini approach starts with pith instruction. This non-reductionist meta-heuristic start at the inside and then move within worlds of expression, and those pith instructions will keep aligning and attuning with the different worlds if we're actually applying them in a living way. And that's why this gets to a point that different people bring up, and it's really true, like to explain the theoretical dynamics, the theoretical kind of like what are the actual teachings of Buddha Dharma compared with how do we live them, and to be around people, as limited sentient beings, and like we mess up and make mistakes and exaggerate and get on personal ego trips and we spiritual bypass and we just get in funks and get in ruts, and we exaggerate our talents and we like kind of hide the things that we're not as comfortable with, and it's just human being stuff. This is sentient being stuff. But especially as Buddhism goes to a new time and place, new countries, like new mind states, new worldviews it's interacting with, that we need to be real clear about what's the Buddha Dharma, what are the actual teachings, and that means we need to study. That means a scholastic approach is going to be the most reliable, and so that's really good to see, because that means the more reliable approach is going to be the one that's really thorough, that we can know the mechanics of how the contexts like intermesh with each other. And so that as contexts shift in these kind of like disruptive or emergent kind of like surprising ways, we have a very nuanced kind of like a rigor, or like actual also muscle memory, with how the contexts are in real time in a detailed fashion. So we can't basically get conned as easily. The path of study, like of study and contemplation, of hearing the teachings and then really testing them for ourselves and kind of starting to absorb them, like refine our intellect, is so foundational. But it always leads to meditation, or the path of simple meditation, this wisdom of actually applying the teachings in our experience and absorbing it and allowing our experience and the ways we experience to transform, to actually be shaped by the Dharma, by naturalness, by cause, condition, and effect more comprehensively, more integrally. And so study is going to be the insurance policy. Great masters like Patrick Rinpoche and Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche, they've said that in the beginning, logic is the most important thing because it's the most reliable. We're testing everything for ourselves. And as we advance or mature, as we become more seasoned on the path of kind of unveiling, revealing things about ourselves and our worlds, then the biggest obstacle is logic. Because logic is only one mode of intelligence. Analytic mind is one mode of intelligence. Propositional knowledge is one mode of intelligence, and as powerful and amazing and really important as that is, as study is, as contemplation is, it's one mode that needs to be integrated with these other modes that we've referenced a little before: participatory mode, perspectival mode, procedural mode. We have these other ways of knowing skills, of embodying perspectives, of co-creatively like being in context, time and place, and like learning from it and offering to it. We have these additional modes, not just logically mapping something and seeing the mechanics and ones and zeros and the only quantifiable aspects of reality. There's all these rich layered qualitative aspects of reality too, and we have to honor both the warm data and the cold data. We need the empirical and the interior. We need the subjective and intersubjective, as well as objective and interobjective. We need like the layered, frothing richness of so-called soft science, of like actually like these much more interiorized science of culture, meaning making over time, and psychology. And I mean, there's so many different kinds of sciences, and the exterior ones too. We need that too: systems theory and chaos theory and neuroscience. And there's so many sciences, and like the more integrative view is to be an active participant of all these complex systems. But we need to see what fits my mind now. And so study is like this meta mapping, or this way of seeing the larger things, patterns that connect. And the path of Yogi Yogini is to have enough trust where we're actually working with a reliable guide in a lineage system that like actually orients towards wisdom and compassion, and we surrender or sync up to it. And with that syncing, we allow the multiplicity of intelligences of all these internested complex systems to like be the kind of body we move through and move as. And then when we get in a place that's mysterious, like it's an unknown beyond our known, it's like we don't even know we didn't know it, then we pull back, we kind of reframe, we activate our study, our refined intelligence, our positive grasping, and then we tune in with kind of whatever we need to locate that in a more kind of like reliable way for our body and our mind and our speech. And then we again turn on a Pith instruction, go right from the inside, and allow ourselves to reintegrate with that larger field of intelligence. This is all assuming a context of wisdom lineage, of working with reliable, trustworthy wisdom beings. But it's like it's a frothy, messy, complex path, because we're not accomplished. We're not fully accepting of our Buddha nature. We trust more like our negative habits, and that's become more so-called natural or just habitual. And so like to learn to trust our non-habituated wisdom awareness, like these other ways of knowing and being and becoming, like that is a process of ordeal. It's a process of stretching, these growth pains. Like it's gonna be involved. We're gonna have to let go of certain things that aren't helpful for us. They've been dysfunctional. They've held us back. These obscurations, emotional and cognitive obscurations, we're gonna have to identify them clearly with intelligence, like to see the different lines and layers and types and the different ways we're kind of like absolutizing, holding on to something unrealistically with expectations that can't be met. And we're going to need to ease that up and relax it and have it become more functional, more flowing, more integrated in larger wholes that it's already a part of, but it refuses to kind of like play with. And that's a very challenging process. And when those challenging moments come up, when the blind spots come up, when we kind of are in touch with something that's very unfamiliar with us, then oftentimes these default mode kind of defense mechanisms turn on, and we kind of regress or revert to like, okay, what are my base level habits? And that's why meditation's so important. Meditation's like really trying to tune into all these different layer habitual ways we have to be, to like with clarity, with intelligence, with kindness, and to like ease them up and allow them to start integrating better, and like the less functional aspects like start to relax and like undo themselves, like untie those temporary knots, and allow for more like fluid flowing elegance in the system. But that untying process is ordeal. It's challenging, it's frictional, it's like dying, because we are dying to these more contracted ways of feeling like me, feeling like us. Like it is this differentiating between like what I know, and I'm integrating what I don't know yet, but as like see some valuable things on the horizon, and to reintegrate that to like build more nuanced, rich, complex body structures, meaning making structures, is quite demanding. And so we need to be able to parse like, when we're getting lost, and when we're, have more clarity, when we're coming from compassion, and when we're just coming from, some judgmental ego trip. And that requires our own intelligence, and also like our availability to receive the intelligence from other people. So both is the way. But in terms of Tibetan Buddhism in general, to like to just do a big step back, like why did I write this big fat book on this? I mean, I think Tibetan Buddhism is one of the examples of a system that's like utterly integral. It honors all of these different interwoven aspects of reality, of self and other, of culture and nature, of all the, it's a just wonderful example of a system that's integral. But the only way you can use it according to what the Buddha taught is at least in an integral way. Otherwise we're going to come to the party with our certain absolutistic habitual tendencies that they're still in this self-absorbed mode enough that we're going to like be not integrating the fullness of what the Buddha Dharma is asking us to integrate. And that's a gradual, step-by-step process, but that's going to be the lowest common denominator bar. Like bodhicitta is the lowest common denominator bar to use Tibetan Buddhism, for example. If we use Tibetan Buddhist practices like visualization, mantra, body postures, tumo, pranayama, like Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche, all these techniques existed before the time of the Buddha. The lion's roar teachings of the Buddha were like primarily like compassion and emptiness, wisdom and compassion. There's many lion's roar teachings of the Buddha, but without wisdom and compassion, it's not Buddhist. Impermanence. Everything's fundamentally impermanent on all scales, levels, lines, types, stages. All of it's impermanent, meaning dependently arisen. Conditioned mind produces suffering. It's pervasive. The very nature of conditioned mind is uncertain or unstable. That's another lines where we're teaching. Like if we don't take on these fundamentals of Buddhism, these first principles of Buddhism, like Four Noble Truths, bedrock Buddhism, renunciation, or called joyful effort, caring for the valuable aspects of our experience so we just don't keep planting seeds for the causes of our future suffering. If we don't actually take on renunciation and bodhicitta and this pure perception views, pure perception meaning what's it like to be a free-flowing part of more integrated systems, impure relative truth and pure relative truth. We can do both. We can see the nightmare and see the dream. We can be in my perspective and our perspective. We can use the imagination, we can use the concrete. We can use the outer and we can use the inner. We can use the logic. We can use the poetry, the cold data, the warm data, the multiplicity of different life experiences. Like if we don't have that pure perception, like it's not going to end up being a Tibetan Buddhist thing we're doing. It might look like it. It might look like a robe and the colors and whatever, say some Tibetan things. But it's like so fixated on its own view, overlooking the foundational principles that make up the view. Four Noble Truths. 6 paramita practices of Bodhisattva. This pure perception view of self and other, of teacher, of retinue, of world, sacred world, of self, of my body, what makes up my body. It's like this higher order elegance, more integrative elegance. If we don't come with these first principles, is just pretend. Like we just look like a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner. But it's like really empty. It's just like impure relative truth, like artificial as a husk. And it's very demanding to actually try to integrate all of our lived experience in an ongoing way from moment to moment and have someone, like a teacher, point out how we keep getting stuck and show us how we're also amazing. The reward of getting unstuck is that we're actually fully enlightened. I mean, so it's like we have to, that's a challenging thing to have our blind spots and our weaknesses, our absolutizing, kind of our unrealistic expectations being pointed out. It's really destabilizing to have the rug pulled out when we're working with a wisdom being who's actually doing that for our benefit, like out of genuine bodhicitta, because the trust has been established and there's genuine bodhicitta there, and they're helping us open up, show up, clean up, wake up, ease up, lighten up, sync up, uplift, all these ups that are actually down and in and out, and it's a multi-layered process. It's like just, up is just metaphor of like more integrative. But it can be down, it can be anyway, it's like directionality is just another game, We'll use what works. So why this book? Tibetan Buddhism is an example of a integrative, definitely an integral system. The only way we can practice it is if we practice it at least integrally, from a worldview that doesn't instantly say my worldview's right and the others are wrong. Instead, it's trying to integrate the valuable contributions of all these different things that make up of you, of being in a world and a body with others. It's trying to integrate them further, more comprehensive, more whole, more complete, more clear, more detailed, more direct expression of the nature. That's the trajectory of the 9-yana path taught by the Buddha and Guru Rinpoche, according to Nyingma school. But what does it mean to do it integrally? Because like the current versions of integral that are usually trending, they're much more on this cognitive only map making kind of like way of understanding systems of systems, or like making maps. There are additional ways, these more mature integral ways of actually living it, of absorbing it, of like actually inhabiting the different terrains, the different layers, lines, states, type, quadrants, like to actually really go into it, in place, in time, in body, with others, based on trust. And we don't have to do that everywhere without discernment. We do have to root ourselves somewhere. We look around, time is fleeting, find something that engages us, that we really have this natural kind of connective kind of like impulse with, and we go deep there and see how it syncs up with all these other layered worlds. And by doing that, like what do we begin to see? We begin to see how we didn't see a lot of stuff. Like we weren't available to a lot of stuff. And a lot of the stuff taught by the Buddha and the sutras and tantras, like current ways of doing integral map making according to like, just cognitive, kind of like mainly healthy orange impulse, empirical, quantifiable aspects of reality, like a lot of the juicy overflow awesomeness of more multi-layered, multi-perspective embodiment and knowledge is not included in those maps yet. A lot of the subtle relative truth and the pure relative truth is not yet on the radar of that way of kind of doing an integral meta theory. And so we're opening it, we're deepening it, and that's what Sutra asks, that's what Tantra asks according to Tibetan Buddhism. And that's why it has to be what I would be called approach in a healthy integral way. Healthy meaning like we're actually holding ourselves accountable with bodhicitta, just like the Vajrayana always asks. We have to hold Sutra as the heart of Tantra. We have to have bodhicitta as the noble beginning, noble middle, and noble conclusion of every Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist practice we do. Otherwise, it's not Tibetan Buddhist. It's lost the simplicity within complexity. It lost the non-reductionist meta-heuristic of bodhicitta. It just looks like Tibetan Buddhism, but it lost the heart. The heart is the sutra. The heart of sutra is like the Shravakayana path. Like Four Noble Truths teachings. Expand into the paramitas. Expand into this kind of like, sacred worlding. Like of seeing things purely. Of seeing things from the Buddha nature's perspective instead of looking from the outside as if I'm conditioned mind is more convincing and you have to prove, Buddha nature to me. We start from Buddha nature, and then we see how it expresses itself elegantly and naturally, and we also see how it can lock up and doesn't do that, how that's so much less fulfilling and much more suffering inducing for self and other, cause so much more trouble when we believe in duality mind more than wisdom awareness. So this is a very complex topic, how to approach things even in secular terms in integral ways, like Buddhism aside. How do we do that? That's a very complex topic. The integral systems taught by different people. Wilbur or Gebser, these different just trailblazers of these different, it's just pointing towards a worldview making, this postmodern integrative mode or awareness. So many great people have pointed towards this. Tibetan Buddhism is an example of like a system that's been established and kind of robustly instanced in body, in place, in time over centuries and millennia. Like, how do we have an integrative awareness that builds culture, builds ritual? It builds and like from it emerges science, from it emerges magic, from it emerges all these other logics, all these other semantics, all these other syntactic pattern makings. Like Tibetan Buddhism is an example that does that. And I'm not saying it's the only example, but it's so rich. And what a rich, complex topic, that the vast, profound teachings of Tibetan Buddhism that includes all the sutras and tantras taught by the Buddha Shakyamuni and all these great noble lineage masters. So how do we navigate this infinite maze of extraordinary, abundance, overflow that is Tibetan Buddhism? We need to learn first principles. What are the essentials of Theravada? What are the essentials of Sutra Mahayana? What are the essentials of Tantra Mahayana? What are the essentials of Dzogchen, or these non-dual paths? How are they all integrated into more seamless wholes? This is what the great master Je Atisha, that was the purpose he found himself when Tara asked him to go to Tibet to be a benefit, to synthesize the full spectrum of the Buddhist teachings taught in India, to synthesize them into elegant ways of practice that can hit all the main points into an elegant whole that's very actionable. Short moments many times. This is like the great master Je Atisha's, like said to be his contribution. This is what the Nyingma teachings of Guru Rinpoche are always doing. This is what the termas come about, to be revealed freshly as the generations continue, like to integrate all of the essential points of the full spectrum of the Buddha's teaching. It's called a sadhana practice in Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism. The noble beginning is always refuge in bodhicitta. The noble middle main practice is always shamatha and vipassana, or concentration and insight. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's called visualization and dissolution, or creation and completion, where it's called creation stage, and then the second, completion, is completion with characteristics and completion without characteristics. These are the inner tantras, the three inner tantras, Maha, Anu, Ati. Then the noble conclusion is always dedicating the merit and making aspiration prayers. Like, in the simple way to explain what is this noble beginning, noble middle, noble conclusion of every sadhana practice that brings everything together, the simple way to say it is bodhicitta. That is a non-reductionist meta-heuristic. It is the simplicity within complexity. According to Buddhism, this is the single point that brings everything together, bodhicitta. When we hold ourselves accountable to bodhicitta, we actually intentionally choose it from moment to moment. We choose bodhicitta. This is what is going to align and attune everything towards an integrative impulse that's healthy. This is it. Otherwise, we can just learn systems of systems. We get really good at seeing all the multifaceted layering, and we just use it for our personal advantage. We do the Rudra move, the Darth Vader move. We get super tuned in to the counteractive dynamical systems, and we use our egoic hijack to just make it for more power for me. 8 worldly dharmas, all about me. I'm so special. Me, me, me. Bodhicitta prevents this. No, you. You first. Them first. They're more important. I'm showing up to get freedom to help them better, to serve the teachings and the beings better. That's why I'm doing this. And we turn that on at the beginning of every session. And as we continue a session, as we conclude a session, that's why, how do we read a book? Like, read a book, a quote of the Buddhism, turn on bodhicitta, read the passage, let it kind of resonate in the open absolute awareness of bodhicitta, and then kind of allowing that kind of like absorbing, transformative kind of like field of awareness that we're a part of to like sync up and integrate this kind of knowledge, this information, or this wisdom that we're kind of like taking in newly, just through our cognitive kind of like analytic conceptual door, SEM, duality mind. And we're letting it kind of like auto-poetically or sympoetically like restructure things inside and outside, to like have wisdom saturate our body, to have our body be wisdom and eventually be wisdom body, transcendental wisdom rainbow body. So I'm throwing around a lot of stuff here. Hope some of it's helpful. This is about simplicity. It's an information overflow time. A lot of challenges of meta crises, of different wicked problems, different complex systems now kind of cross-pollinating and kind of interacting at great speeds and scales. And all of a sudden we're like, what is happening here? This is too much for me. So we need these elegant simplicity within complexity Pith instructions. And Vajrayana Buddhism is filled with them. But the only way we can use them appropriately, according to the Buddhist teaching, is with bodhicitta. Bodhicitta includes the fundamental, foundational, first principle essentials of all the different yanas. So we need to know, if I never open a Dharma book ever again, if I never get to hear another word of Dharma, like, do I know the first principles well enough that I still have a comprehensive, complete path to enlightenment, so I can be a benefit for self and others? We need to know. That's like a really a strong kind of like urgency of practitioners who take this seriously to actually serve the teachings and beings. Like, we need to know these first principles well enough. That's the study side. And we need to constantly activate them, turn them on as lived experience, like in our life right now today. That's the practice side. Nyingma school integrates practice and like study and practice, or like compassion and meditation, or like positive grasping and non-grasping, or wisdom and merit. Like, it integrates these two as a seamless whole called the path. And we need to know, do we have a complete path? We need to get really confident we have it, and then we need to keep applying it in our daily lived experience. And that path is streamlined by being part of these larger webs of Sangha, of complex systems, of other beings, especially with wisdom elders who see way beyond, way more, much more layered, much more multifaceted than I'm currently available for. And they see that, and they're like, out of bodhicitta, helping me kind of like make intelligent decisions and use challenging, kind of overwhelming unknowns that I'm not yet kind of seeing, like, use them wisely for the co-creative, like, mutual uplift of benefit of self and others, for enlightenment of all beings as soon as possible. So, hope it's helpful. Pith instructions, practice with bodhicitta. That's the elegant kind of through line. All right. Love you, friends. Quick dedication. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. Precious bodhicitta, and those without it, may it be generated. And those who have it, may it never diminish, but always continue increasing. Deity, mantra, and dharmakaya are the nature of appearance, sound, and awareness, the pervasive kaya and wisdom display of the Buddhas. May practitioners of the profound and secret great perfection remain inseparable from the innermost, one-taste awareness of wisdom mind. Thank you.